Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. We're here today to take another trip down memory lane. We're actually going to be looking back at sniping as I remember it in Bad Company 2. So I actually didn't really want to talk about my recent experiences with it, although I found them to be very similar, at least to what I remembered, which that memory may be foggy, it may be jaded, we don't really know. Memories are a very interesting thing, and I am not a specialist on memories, so we're not going to go there. But I wanted to look back at my memories of the sniper role inside of Bad Company 2, because it wasn't the last time that I was really into the sniper role. I actually quite liked sniping in Battlefield 3, but I think it was the last time that the sniper role was in a place where it wasn't just about trying to shoot people from as far away as possible. I think that's one of the biggest issues with the expansive map design that we now have in modern Battlefields, you know, starting with Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, now in Battlefield 1 even to some degree, but primarily those modern settings, those modern takes really upped the ante for just how large the maps were and just how far away people would end up trying to shoot each other. And the first time you played Battlefield 3, you know, you're sniping, and then about a month later, you start to realize that there are the people who are actually engaging in the objective, whether you're playing Rush or Conquest, and then there are the snipers. And for the most part, those snipers were shooting at each other from like two mountaintops on the opposite sides of the map. We all remember this. You remember it on Operation Firestorm. People just trying to go back further and further and further to see how far of a shot they could make. And, I mean, rightfully so. It's pretty cool to be able to send your friends a little gif of like, hey, look it, I just landed this 3,000 meter headshot on this guy. You know, even though it was the 20th shot I took and he was laying prone behind a rock trying to shoot me, you know, I only showed you that last shot, so I look pretty boss. You know, I get the appeal, and I can't say that I haven't spent a little bit of time doing that myself. But when I look back at Bad Company 2 sniping, my personal memories were of a much more recon scout-based role and playstyle, one in which I was always at a reasonable support distance from my squad. This is primarily when playing Rush, I should point out. I really didn't play Conquest, as I mentioned in our last Bad Company 2 video. Rush was really my jam, and I liked the idea of Rush as a sniper because, again, you were moving forward, you were advancing, and you were having to deal with different obstacles as you progressed through the environment. So you'd have, you know, different terrain that you'd have to engage the enemy within. You have to have the map knowledge to find different lines of sight, to find those elevation points, to get in the best possible positions to engage the enemy without exposing yourself, and while also, of course, giving yourself maximum potential to engage the enemy, because there's nothing worse than a sniper on the squad when they can't actually land any shots on the enemy that your team is engaging or dealing with. So you'd always be trying to find a line of sight on the actual objective, you know, possibly landing targets or at least landing spots on enemies that were maybe going in to try and defuse a bomb so you can make your team aware or just clean up that target. That was a really good feeling. You know, it's not that you can't do that inside of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 when it comes to Rush, but for me, again, my memories in Bad Company 2 were so vivid. Like, the map design really allowed for sniper support around those objectives if the sniper knew where to look, you know, knew where to set themselves up. And being able to pull the trigger and land some, you know, in-motion headshots on enemies that were about to defuse a bomb just before it detonates, you know, really realizing that you prevented them from setting off that, from defusing that charge and pushing your team towards victory, that was a really satisfying moment. You know, you really felt like there was purpose behind each and every trigger pull and the bullets that you fired and the kills that said bullets made. It was an awesome feeling, it really was. Now, Bad Company 2 was also the Bush Wookiee era, for those of you who don't remember. All the recon class, as they called it at that point, had a ghillie suit. The ghillie suit was kind of useful. You know, you could use it to blend into trees and bushes and stuff like that. I tried to at times. It had some effectiveness to it, but the spotting mechanic was really so powerful in Bad Company. You could pretty much spot anything just by spamming the spot key and looking across the screen, that it kind of, you know, balanced things out with it, but nonetheless, that's just kind of the name that people got. People were still not happy with snipers back then. I don't think people are ever going to be happy about being engaged by a sniper, and I actually made an entire video about how the sniper role often ruins everyone else's fun. And I still agree to some extent. even when we look back at Bad Company 2. But I had mostly good memories with it. And again, this may be foggy and jaded, but I felt like the sniper role was less loved. Not saying that people, you know, hated it more back then than they hate it now. I think there's an equal amount of hatred for being killed by a sniper. It's just the nature of that role. But I'm actually talking about the number of people who are playing it. You know, it seemed like less people were interested in playing the sniper role. I don't know why that was, or if that's a recent, you know, sort of revelation that came about in the last 5-6 years, where all of a sudden everybody loves the idea of sniping. But back then, it felt like it was a much more, you know, tight-knit sort of niche group that was really into the sniper role. You know, I don't remember having to deal with like 15 snipers on my team when I was playing Rush. Again, it's maybe just foggy memories, but for me there was a few snipers, and there was a lot of people really interested in playing the other roles, which meant that being a sniper, being a good sniper, felt really cool. You know, you felt like you were genuinely an asset to your team. So I think there was less of a willingness to just go stick yourself out in the middle of nowhere and see how far you could shoot. The thing though about the sniper role in Bad Company 2 was that we didn't have like all of the scope magnification options that you have in Battlefield 3 or in Battlefield 4. You know, these were really just limited scope zooms, limited scope magnification optics, which made engaging targets at long range incredibly difficult, which is why a lot of people didn't really do it. If you did, it was that personal satisfaction. You were going out there to hunt down a target at long range to show that you could, of course, estimate your bullet drop and your lead properly. That obviously being another massive implementation that Bad Company 2 did for the series. Bad Company 1 did not feature bullet drop. This would be the first time that we would see proper bullet drop physics for the sniper rifle was in Bad Company 2, and that would pave the way forward. Obviously, bullet drop physics have been a part of the franchise ever since. One thing that I guess I will talk a little bit about my recent time with Bad Company 2. One thing that stood out to me is that I feel, you know, when we look at modern Battlefield, they felt that it was necessary to throw all these crazy scope options into the mix to make the sniper role less difficult. I think once you started adding in all these crazy advanced animations, the development team felt like, oh, you know, okay, well, what's the payoff for the sniper role? You know, we have these really big maps. You know, just how far do we want to allow them to engage targets at? And they started throwing in, you know, the 40x and the hunter scope, and I don't think that was a good decision. I think one of the things that helped Bad Company 2 sniping be so solid was that limited scope magnification that the sniper rifles actually had. You know, it really forced you to consider your engagement distance and consider just how effective you wanted to be. There wasn't really an option to throw a 40x on with a rangefinder and, you know, really just, you know, set your weapons doping, you know, set your zeroing and you know, drop a target at 3,000 meters. So I think it's one of the areas in which the franchise has advanced in terms of adding technology, adding gameplay mechanics, you know, with the rangefinder, the different scope magnifications, and of course, most importantly, the ability to dope your scope for different ranges. Those are things, though, that I actually am not super into. Like, I feel like it would have been best to leave a little bit more purity to that. I don't really actually like the idea of doping your scope on the fly either. I know it is to some degree a realistic thing if we want to talk about realism, but I think for the sake of gameplay, I would have loved to see them continue to force snipers to have to use their mil dots and have to use their, you know, their mil dots for leading and for bullet drop. It would have just kept that role, I think, in a place where it required a bit more challenge. I don't think it's necessary for the sniper role to be a role that everyone can pick up and play within the first 10 minutes. Which, interestingly enough, BF1 is giving players the option to dope their scope and their sights to some degree. You can actually set to different yardages. I don't know how I feel about that still. You know, while we're on the subject, I'm not really a fan of it. I you know, again, it's an area in the game where I think it would have made more sense to just force the player to recognize those mil dots, to have to, you know, make the adjustment on the fly via the scope, not via an actual adjustment within the scope. We're going to see, though. I'm curious to see how the scout role works out long-term in BF1, as we're here making this comparison. I don't know about it. You know, I don't think it's, like, overly effective. I think it's still a scout role. You know, when it comes to actually landing kills, I think it's a minor irritation is what it is in most instances. You have so many people who want to play the role, but they're really not effective at it. They're really not that good at it. The people who are really good, who can, you know, lead targets and do bullet drop, I think they're going to have a heyday with BF1 because there seems to be a reduced amount of bullet drop for the bullet physics. I think a lot of that has to do with the map size as well that we're dealing with. I mean, you look at Sinai and Quentin Scar even when I was in the alpha, and they're nowhere near as big in terms of the standard engagement range that a sniper would use as a map like FpsTom or, you know, Capsian Border. Like, the list goes on and on. Pretty much pick any Battlefield 4, any Battlefield 3 map that was larger open scale maps, and I mean, there's just nothing like what we've seen in BF1 so far. But there's plenty of opportunity for them to throw even larger scale maps at us. Again, we do have scope technology limitation in Battlefield 1, which I think is going to make things, again, more difficult when we talk about excessive long-range engagements. So we'll see how that all pans out. At the end of the day, I think Bad Company 2 is still one of my favorite games when it comes to sniping. I think the mechanics, I think that just the way the gameplay was designed around that role was in a nice sweet spot. Would I love to have some of the modern touchings? Yeah, of course. You know, you look back at it, it feels dated to some degree. No bipod deployment, the inability to go prone. You know, again, at that point in time, it added balance to the game. But it's something that we simply can't do without in a modern first-person shooter setting. You know, it's just, these are things that have become almost a standard for large-scale multiplayer FPS. You know, you need to have a bipod. I have to be able to go prone. So the franchise has come a long way. It's definitely evolved, at the end of the day, I guess, for better or for worse. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about your experiences with the sniper role back in the days of Bad Company 2. Hell, if you want to tell me about Battlefield 3 or Battlefield 4, and even talk about Battlefield 1, we can just turn it into a big old Battlefield sniping discussion. You know, where do you feel the role was best? And maybe what mechanics have been implemented since Bad Company 2 that you feel should go away, that you feel were really not necessary for the role to continue to exist. Let me know down in the comment section below. Anything else for me, throw it down there as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.